Dear friends, it's always inspiring to return to Turkey, where I always receive your gracious hospitality with deep-seated friendships. And these are values that are increasingly rare in today's world, in a world that's marked with geopolitical tensions, conflicts, xenophobia, or social media hate speech. So that's why I would first of all like to thank the chairperson of the Global Relations Forum, Zeynep Bodur, for this kind invitation. Rahmi Koç, friend and supporter of the Greek-Turkish rapprochement, businessman, honorary chairman of the Global Relations Forum, but also recipient of an award we created, İPEK and I, the Cem Papandreou Peace Award. And of course, the many diplomats and former diplomats in the audience, and also Professor Füsun Türkmen, who was the spouse of the later İlter Türkmen, one of the one-time ambassadors to Greece, and also Turkish foreign minister. Great to see Ana Palacio also, and Vukcanovic here amongst us. Our partnership became more than dedicated diplomacy between myself and Ismail Cem. It developed into lasting friendships, which I have over the years. İPEK Cem, who is here, and her family, we became very close friends. Sule and her family, and so many of others. And it's important because the challenges persist between our two countries. New issues sometimes arise, but our joint efforts, the work we have done, the time we have spent together in dialogue or over wine, have forged a bond of trust. This friendship, this trust, we must continue to honor, to cherish, and to nurture. Because this conference centers on the vast uncertainties we face, yet it's clear that the problems before us are shared by all humanity. We are united not only by our challenges, but by our responsibility to act collectively for a shared future. That's why this friendship and trust we have developed is crucial, as we need solidarity, understanding, respect, and trust if we want to secure a peaceful and cooperative global society. Yet these are often missing in our global institutions. Reflecting on my tenure when I was Prime Minister during Greece's financial crisis, I felt that I was navigating through a storm with no clear map. I was in uncharted waters, much like what we face today. In such times, our ancestors, like Odysseus seeking Ithaca, looked for a North Star for guidance and for security. So I ask you today, what is our North Star in these uncertain times? Well, recently leaders convened in New York for the UN Summit for the Future, a gathering not about predicting what comes next, but about shaping it. This summit was an urgent call to reimagine our future, both what we aspire to follow, but also what we must avoid. And in this era of profound crisis, it has become clear that progress is not guaranteed. We are not on an automatic pilot towards progress. What we produce, the technologies we create, can heal or can harm. This duality was understood by the summit. It was a pivotal moment to think of our destiny, but even more so to seize control of our collective destiny. What emerged from the discussions were several guiding principles, if you like, North Stars, to direct our global efforts. Possibly the most important central point of the summit was that all reinforced the necessity for robust multilateral cooperation. Our interconnected challenges demand collective action. No nation can triumph alone. UN Security Council reforms, enhancing representation, particularly for underrepresented areas such as Africa. Financial system reform, modifying international financial frameworks, to amplify the voices of developing nations, promoting equitable economic progress. Inclusive economic growth, because we need to bridge inequalities, access to education, healthcare, economic opportunities for all, ensuring growth benefits for all layers of society, and particularly the marginalized. Sustainable development, climate action. It underscored the critical goals of limiting global warming to 1.5 Celsius and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Inclusivity, empowering youth, women, essential. Their involvement both helps innovation, but also is crucial for sustainable governance. A global digital compact introduced to ensure technology serves humanity, emphasizing ethical principles for AI, for its development and digital cooperation. Human rights and dignity reaffirmed in the summit, focusing on strengthening methods and mechanisms to protect our rights globally. Peace and security, a renewed commitment to nuclear disarmament. Unluckily, we are hearing again about the possibility of nuclear war, enhanced by UN peacekeeping operations, which will highlight the ongoing efforts to secure global peace. So all this sounds promising, but during my discussions there, and I'm sure both Anna and Vuk heard this also, I heard a reference to what was called an asymmetry. Asymmetry, a nice Greek word, but what was it meant? What was meant by this word? Very simply, we have a gap between words and actions. What stands as a barrier to progress towards these crucial goals for humanity? Well, these crises, be they vast inequalities, escalating CO2 levels, the arms race, concentrated wealth, digital platforms' dominance, or the stalling of international bodies like the United Nations, these are not acts of gods or external forces, such as a meteorite hitting the earth. They are man-made problems, born from our behaviors, our economic systems, our consumption patterns, and our governance. So we must be honest with ourselves. We must embrace a stark reality. The situation begins and the solution begins with us. We must become the agents of change we seek. It's time to fundamentally rethink our economic and social structures. So what is stopping us? I'll highlight three critical barriers. First of all, change of habits, behavior, culture is not easy. But there are deeper barriers than this. Real change challenges existing power structures. So the Future Summit prioritized a change in global governance. Well, in many ways, this implies a transformative approach from the United States. Why the US? Because today's structures are dominated by the US, and the post-Cold War era saw the US as the sole superpower in a unipolar world. However, the global landscape has since shifted to multipolarity, characterized by multiple significant powers. This multipolarity often breeds competition and conflict that could escalate globally, which exactly we see today. The necessity to shift from multipolarity to multilateralism is prominent. What does this mean? Multilateralism requires shared rules, values, and institutions, facilitating cooperative global action rather than conflictual competition. This means the US must adapt to no longer being the sole arbiter, but a collaborative partner, sharing power through reforms in key international bodies like the UN Security Council and financial institutions like the World Bank and the IMF and more. But power sharing demands trust, respect, dialogue, and an end to double standards that undermine a rule-based world. Mark Medish, a good friend of mine, wrote a few days ago that we need a multicultural, multilateral world order where the US acknowledges the limits of its influence and commits to reciprocity and mutual respect in global relations. Post-Cold War, the West missed an opportunity to build robust multicultural structures, opting instead for military interventions I would call military adventures, spending resources and credibility on expeditions that harmed the world order. So now it's imperative to forge partnerships across continents to build institutions based on cooperation and not domination. Europe, of course, is unique. With its experience building cooperative institutions after major war, the Second World War, across cultures, peoples, nations, through shared values, it should be well positioned to lead in this effort. That is Europe's challenge today, and the success of Europe in these endeavors will mirror the success or failure of a truly multilateral global system. A second pressing issue lies not with states, but with the structures of global finance and capitalism. While globalization has spurred growth, the aftermath of financial crises and austerity measures has exacerbated wealth disparities and inequalities, enriching the few at the expense of many. I should know this as I dealt with this during the financial crisis. I was then asked to, for example, tax the Greeks in order to pay our debts and lower our deficit. Yet the well-off and the big corporations could easily leave Greece to find tax havens and avoid their responsibility to our country. But this is a worldwide practice, and it has led to a huge concentration of wealth, which, however, also translates into a concentration of power, where politics are influenced by special interests through strong lobbying or corruption, often captured by them, serving an elite rather than the common good. Media outlets, sport teams, banks, major industries like oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, finance, arms industries, and digital platforms wield more power than many governments. Despite the unprecedented availability of wealth and knowledge, massive inequalities still persist, creating a profound sense of injustice and rendering governments incapable of providing essential services from health to housing. This disenfranchises citizens, leaving them feeling voiceless. Addressing these challenges requires profound shifts in mindsets from individuals, governments, and corporations alike. It calls for mobilization of reasoned voices and strong citizens' movements. But if we fail to adapt, we will confront an even greater political dilemma. Because these crises have ushered in an era marked not just by uncertainty, but by profound insecurity. Rising living costs, a lack of essential services such as health, education, and housing compound this insecurity, while existential threats like AI or climate change loom large. But this impact is not just material, it is deeply personal. Insecurity brings with it disempowerment, marginalization, a corrosive mix of fear, anger, and injustice. This was poignantly expressed by a young Turkish woman I met recently, and many other citizens I meet around the world, like her, who asked me, why should I vote? Does it really make a difference? They asked me this because now I happen to have a different position. My position is in the Council of Europe as General Rapporteur for Democracy, and I have to think about why our democracies are backsliding and what we can do to enhance them, how we can empower our societies. But this growing alienation from politics and a pervasive sense of impotence are undermining the foundational values of our democracies. If we fail to enact necessary changes, we risk nurturing the seeds of authoritarianism and the rise of demagogues. And we are witnessing an alarming rise in ultra-right leaders who thrive on nationalism and division. They promote a simple philosophy of an us versus them. A mentality where your loss is my gain. It's a zero-sum game. They are after power. They hide the real problems by scapegoating, and they exploit these basic instincts for their political games. So when a storm hits you, what is our instinct? And we are facing storms. Well, what is our knee-jerk natural reaction? You run into your home. You close the doors. You close the windows. You hide. Well, that is what Brexit was. If we allow this despair to erode our hope, our dignity, our prospects for our children, we erode our sense of solidarity, distancing ourselves from our community and for all those who need our help and refuge. So we find ourselves in a very paradoxical as well as a troubling era. Because in this age of insecurity, when cooperation is most needed, we see nations retreating into ultranationalism rhetoric. At the same time, when we need innovation, bold thinking to navigate unprecedented challenges, our fears stifle risk-taking and experimentation. I believe real leadership means that we should sincerely acknowledge the uncertainties of our world, admitting there are no easy answers, no predefined solutions, and instead seek to explore, discuss, collaborate, to forge consensus, to find solutions. Deepen our democracies, to use the wisdom of the collective to forge a communal sense of purpose. However, this approach of exploring, of opening and saying, we don't know as leaders, is perceived as weakness. As many people yearn for a paternal, authoritarian figure, a savior, they believe will offer immediate protection and resolution. So these are some of these paradoxes. However, when these authoritarian leaders fail to address the challenges, as they do, they invariably look for scapegoats. They scapegoat others. The Mexicans, the Chinese, the migrants, the Haitians, the Muslims, the Jews, or our historical foes. And when blaming others is insufficient, they resort to conspiracy theories. Like recently, the claims that Joe Biden engineered the mega hurricane in Florida. Such theories are less about disputing facts and more about pushing their followers to blind obedience. The consequences are clear. These leaders, this type of leadership, divides and polarizes, therefore rendering our societies incapable of meaningful change. It erodes our freedoms, undermines our democracies, and leaders who tout slogans like "Make America Great Again" or "Germany for the Germans," or advocate for taking back control by leaving Europe, actually lead the world to completely lose control of our future. The opposite of what they are saying. They are leading us towards greater insecurity, injustice, fear, hatred, and xenophobia. This is a recipe not just for continued unrest, but for outright disaster. So while our most pressing, most serious problems are common, as we confront our most serious global challenges, massive migration, pandemics, deepening inequalities, climate change, nuclear threats, and divisive technologies, we may easily be carried away by leaders who whip us up into nationalistic fervor and fear. So to me, today's fundamental political divide isn't between China and the US, or India and Pakistan, or even Russia and Ukraine, or Israel and Palestine, even though the horrors of these wars are unimaginable. But the real divide lies between leaders who cultivate a culture of cooperation, of respect for one another, and of a rule-based world, and on the other side of those who exploit and profit from discord, animosity, hatred speech, and polarization. It is this divide in the end that prevents us from recognizing and addressing the root problems of the world. Well, this realization struck me 25 years ago during my tenure as Minister of Foreign Affairs. When I met Ismail Cem, Greece and Turkey were on the brink of conflict over Öcalan. We could have chosen mutual recriminations, a shouting match across the Aegean. We could have chosen to become heroes for a day, fleeting heroes in our respective countries, but such heroism is short-lived, leaving underlying issues unresolved or even worsened. Instead, we chose a different path. Despite difficult issues like Cyprus and maritime boundaries, we embarked on a journey toward building a new relationship based on peace and cooperation, finding common ground in areas such as business, energy, tourism, and sports. This was our North Star, guiding us through uncharted waters. At that time, for 40 years, the only agreement we had between Greece and Turkey was to suspend dogfights during the summer. However, within just 2 years of collaborating with Ismail Cem, we signed over 30 bilateral agreements. Our annual trade, which was a mere $3 million, soared to $3 billion. Beyond these numbers, the real achievement was framing our bilateral relations within a broader regional, European, and global context. And here are 3 illustrative examples. Firstly, Greece decided to lift the veto to Turkey's candidacy for the European Union, and actually, we still are promoters of this idea and this prospect. We believe that by aligning our goals and aspirations with those of Europe, we could manage our bilateral issues more effectively, but also contribute to shared values and common objectives in our region. Secondly, as Greece was preparing to host the Olympic Games, Ismail signed and championed the Olympic Truce, an initiative to cease hostilities during the Games. For example, when North and South Korea went together a few years ago. We garnered support and went around the world globally, securing signatures from world leaders and influential figures across various continents, including all European heads of state, the foreign ministers of China, of Canada, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, as well as Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat, Bill Clinton, and Nelson Mandela. I still have those signatures at my home. This initiative was a bold move to halt conflicts, give peace a chance. But what it did also was to position Greece and Turkey together on the global stage as advocates for peace. Thirdly, during a severe crisis in Ramallah, with Yasser Arafat's headquarters under siege, and I think the ambassador then is with us here today, Ismail and I undertook a bold diplomatic initiative. We traveled to the Middle East together to meet with both Ariel Sharon and Yasser Arafat, carrying a very strong message of peace. Couldn't we do this today? We also did this in the Balkans, as Vuk may remember. What I realized is that the collective power of Greeks and Turks in this endeavor demonstrated that when we work together, our impact is exponentially greater. What I consider a case of 1 + 1 = 10. I share these examples to illustrate 2 points. First, this approach represents a form of patriotism that is the opposite, and I would say much stronger than ultranationalism. It's a patriotism that highlights the best of our peoples, brings out the best of our societies and our nations, not our animosities, not our fears, but our potential and our shared humanity, which is a source of immense pride. Second, these examples underscore the necessity for today's world. They challenge the narrative that we must go alone, that we cannot trust our neighbors, and that seeking dialogue, diplomacy, and cooperation is naive. We must confront these narratives of fatalism and passivity and resist the pervasive attitudes of pessimism which views war as inevitable and resignation, which treats war as a permanent feature. In summary, our collaborative efforts between Greeks and Turks have the potential to make significant impacts, not just within our countries, but across the region, throughout Europe, and I would say in the world. This is the power of partnership, the strength of unity over division, proving that together we can forge a path towards lasting peace. And this message is more relevant today than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to propose some comprehensive framework between Greek and Turkish cooperation, as we are in an era of continuing rapprochement, fortunately. One that will not only strengthen our bilateral ties, but also position us as leaders in regional and global stability. Let me outline 10 key areas. Aegean cooperation. Let's transform the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean from a symbol of tension into a model of collaboration, addressing issues like maritime boundaries through dialogue, mutual respect, and on the basis of international law. Secondly, in a world of fragmented global leadership, our united front can set an example in addressing critical issues such as energy security, migration management, and climate resilience. Thirdly, while disputes over the Aegean and Cyprus persist, we must view their resolution not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity to strengthen our ties and project a new narrative of stability in our region. Fourth, let's explore joint peace-building efforts in our wider region, leveraging our unique position and shared experience to foster dialogue and understanding. 5, we should lead the charge in sustainable development with our business community, transforming our economies together and turning our shared environmental challenges into opportunities for cooperation. 6, instead of competing over fossil fuel resources, let's pivot to a joint renewable energy project in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean, setting a new paradigm for regional energy cooperation, not only between our two countries, but through the whole region, which can become a real peace project. 7, in the digital age, we can create a shared innovation ecosystem. I talked about it with one of our friends today. Ensuring we remain competitive while also promoting ethical use of technology and deployment. 8, building on our history of citizens' diplomacy, which we worked a lot with Ismail Cem, let's further empower our civil societies to cultivate grassroots trust and understanding. I remember when we started a rapprochement some years ago, I had someone in my office report to me, tell me what civil society is doing. What are the initiatives? Women to women, youth to youth, local government to local government, business to business. So every month he would come with a report. After a few months, he stopped giving me a report. So I called him and I said, why aren't you giving me a report? He said, I'm sorry, there are so many initiatives, I just cannot record them. So this people's diplomacy was of huge importance in our relationships. Finally, economic partnership, expanding areas of trade, joint ventures, shared investments, collaborative economic areas, and of course, our rich culturals. We need to deepen our rich cultural ties through educational programs, artistic collaborations, sports initiatives, celebrating our shared heritage while embracing our diversity. And for me, culture is also our democracies, deepening what we have, this great tradition of democracy, to make our citizens feel more empowered, both within and between our societies. By embracing these areas of cooperation, Greece and Turkey can demonstrate to the world that even long-standing rivals can unite for collective peace and prosperity. Our shared history and mutual challenges are not burdens, but opportunities to rise together and lead by example in a world desperately in need of unity and stability. Thank you very much.